All right. I'm ready to get started. Good morning, everyone. Sue and I thought we would approach this the way we did last time and just sort of go through it scene by scene, describing what's happening and what we learned from it. And that allows us to kind of build to the exciting and dramatic conclusion to this act. So Sue, would you, I will start us off by saying we are now in a room that is strewn with red roses. The lilies are gone.
Yeah. Very significant. The red roses have replaced the lilies, and the connotations are obvious. It's also afternoon and hot, sunny, quite a different atmosphere now. The decor is the same. The window is open. The window will play a very important part in this act. Yes, and this is such an important act. This is the crux of the play, really. And whereas we had dramatic action in the last act, here we have much more interior action. This is the first act was about what's happening, what's going on, what's the story, how's the story going on. This is much more about feelings and the difficulty of reconciling emotion with reason and what you want to do with what you ought to do. It's the crux comes in scene 7, so we work up to that scene, and we left it with this dramatic no at the end of Act 2, didn't we?
Yes. Okay, so we have Sorismond putting words into her mouth is how I read it, about why this emphatic no. And she says, you didn't want to mar your image of the ideal with visions of death. And
yes, we're running on a bit. There's something we ought to remember in scene 1. Okay. Which is that Sorismond, who is very detached about the whole thing, really, and she doesn't let on what she's thinking, as you say. Later on, she does make a suggestion, but it's not the right one. So for the moment, she is just very vague when Bertrand says, why on earth did she say no? What is it? And of course, he is desperately anxious because time is passing. So Sorismond tells him what she can see out of the window, and the important sail is still white. But she also mentions that there's another ship that's preparing to go out of harbour, and it's the one taking the body of the Chevalier des Armes Vertes back to Byzantium, as it was then. And so there are 2 ships in the harbour, and the one has already someone who's dead on it. The other one has someone who's dying, and that's the one that concerns us. But it's important to know that there are 2 ships in the harbour. And Bertrand is rather lost in a reverie, isn't he? And he just keeps thinking about Mélisande's eyes. I think we've reached the point, really, certainly with Bertrand, and later on with Mélisande, where the audience or the readers really know what is in the character's mind better than the characters themselves. They are less aware of what their feelings are. Sorismond is perfectly clear about what's going on. And so later on is Squarcia Fico, but that's a way on yet. And so yes, so Sorismond keeps it very vague. Oh, yes, well, she can't say. And luckily, Mélisande arrives, makes another dramatic entrance down the staircase. And this is where, as you say, Mélisande is so anxious, isn't she? She is sighing. She's very slow. She's not thinking about what impression she's making now on pilgrims. She's wondering what on earth is going on. Why on earth did she say no? She's trying to work it out. And Sorismond suggests a possibility. First, she says, there really is a reason. There's a good reason. And he said, no, shush, shush, shush. But then Sorismond decides to put it slightly differently and gives her a perfectly possible explanation of why she's in this terrible state. It's the contrast between the reality of this handsome young man and the dying poet to whom she owes her loyalty. And so Sorismond says, you can't bear to face the dying poet. You'd rather remember him and keep your wonderful love as a special memory, really, without confusing it, without worrying about actual reality of the dying poet. You want to keep this vision. That's Sorismond's suggestion, isn't it?
But is that suggestion an excuse, or it's a more palatable? Yeah, it's a more palatable explanation.
Because it's an excuse.
Okay, it's an excuse.
It's what Melisande wants to hear. She is so confused. She has not admitted to herself the real reason,
right?
And we all know what it is. She has completely fallen for Bertrand. And so when Sorismond suggests it, she is so relieved. Oh, yes. Oh, that's all it was then. Good. Oh, thank goodness. Right. Well, now you can ask him to come in. And Sorismond says, well, why bother to talk to him, And of course, she wants to talk to him. She doesn't want to just say, I'm not going to see him anymore. So Sorismond has a smile to herself here. Well, if you're using, what's it? And so Melisande has an answer for this. She says, I really owe it to Bertrand to let him have another go at convincing me, which is, the self-deception carries on through there. And Sorismond queries this, you ought to? And perhaps he'll be able to persuade me, says Melisande. So then we have Bertrand and Melisande together. And for a while, it looks as if Melisande is going to go along with it. But before that, she's saying, you need to plead his cause. Tell me why I should go and see Rudel. He's still alive because we know that the sail is white. And Bertrand explains that he was confused because he was so... he's talking to himself to start with, I was silly to start with. She'd been so kind to me up till then, and then she said no. I felt perhaps that I'd been cheated in a way by... taken in by this wonderful scent. Now, perfume comes up quite a lot. And he says this to Melisande, and Melisande explains what the perfume is. And then, now, why does she do this? She holds out her wrist to him. Really, this is flirting, isn't it? Don't you think?
Yes. Well,
she's tempting him.
I also, in Bertrand's lines, I really like, I don't know how it appears in the original, but I love in the translation the use of ellipsis, because it seems like every time we see an ellipsis, he's sort of wavering between duty and being all consumed by Melisande. So I stood so stupidly, and here we have an ellipsis, and then the vision fled away so rapidly she hurled her no against me like a blow. And then he says, I was as one deluded, one who dreamed. And then he just goes into these rhapsodies on her perfume.
Yes.
Well, that is letting himself be carried.
He's almost blaming himself for being taken in by. He's blaming the perfume, really. Yes.
But it's so those lines are so beautiful too, which I feel like as an audience member helps to heighten kind of the tension of this whole scene, because we feel drawn in the same way that they do. So if he starts rhapsodizing about her perfume and words so beautiful, I feel seduced by that too.
Yes. She's still this wonderful princess, isn't she? And so they continue. Tell me about Rudel, says Bertrand. And Mélisande just interrupts, just very briefly, on and off, doesn't she? So he starts off by explaining, Bertrand explains how he came to join Rudel. And Mélisande says, and he loved you right away. And later on, she congratulates him. Well, yes, I loved him straight away, said Bertrand. And I wanted to follow him. And she says, more or less, good for you. Well done. So she's everything she says goes back to Bertrand. Bertrand takes a while to understand this. How Bertrand explains how Rudel taught him to say the verses that he began the scene with, the action with last time. And he must have spoken them so beautifully, she says.
Can I pause on that for a moment? Because I didn't really notice that, and I just appreciate that so much now, that if you just extract her lines, it's on page 109 and 110. I can imagine her, like, he's telling the story of Rudel, and I almost imagine her just kind of dreamily looking into his eyes, hearing only about him. And so, oh, speak, and you loved, and once you loved him, oh, well done. And you said them so well. You said them so well. You're right. It's all about him, and everything he says about his rival is just, she's entirely focused on his delivery of it.
Yes, exactly. So, and there's a wonderful passage where he describes the voyage, and I think he's forgotten all about Mélisande at this point, don't you? And he gets really lyrical about the epic voyage. How shall I describe this to you, woman? How difficult it was to come towards your smile again. You know, he's thinking of her as well. It's marvelous. It's marvelous. And he brings this journey so alive for Mélisande. She starts to tremble. And she says, oh, and you were facing all these dangers. And finally, the penny drops with Bertrand. He's surprised. You know, this is about Rudel, you know. Me? And Mélisande tries to cover up very quickly, doesn't she? Oh, yes. Well, yes, allow me to appreciate the beauty of your gratitude. But he has understood. And he says, Madame. And then, of course, she carries on. How can you be
can I
so
interrupt?
modest?
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
I wanted to draw the parallel here, but it's parallel but also very different, to the scene in Cyrano de Bergerac when he's explaining how he happened to have a farewell letter already written, and he says, you know, never to see her again, and I never, you never, we never, you never. He's gotten so swept away.
It's the same, isn't it? And that's when the penny drops for Christian as well. Yes. And Bertrand continues to be loyal. She's ashamed, I think, don't you? Here you are, what a loyal, rare friend you are, and I am definitely going to go and give the order to get my boat ready. So it looks as if she's now going to come. She rushes out.
So, Sue, that is where one of my first questions comes in. I was a little bit confused by this, and I don't know if it's just ambiguous or if it's the translation. So they have, you know, she's been entirely focused on him. There's that moment where he says, me or mine, and she says, yes, and then she sort of stumbles over her words, madam, and then she says, are you so modest you must stand apart, deny your service to your very heart, a friend so loyal, love so pure and steady? So she's still talking about him, and then she resolves that she has to go. So I was confused about the motivation to go in that moment.
Well, I think she's a bit confused as well. And I think she has been won over by Bertrand here, that he has been such a loyal. How can she take him away really from his friend? How can she spoil this friendship? She can't, she feels she must not. This is such a wonderful loyalty that Bertrand is showing. She has to do what is right. And I mean, what is right is to go to Rudel. I think we all agree about that.
So, and then after that, it says Bertrand seems about to speak. And then she says, but not another word.
Yes.
So is he about to speak of his own? I mean, is he going to discourage her from going when he's about to speak?
He is maybe going to say something like, oh, thank goodness, something like that, or I'm so grateful to you, something like that. He still has not really admitted to himself the huge impression Melisande has made on him. I think it's still in his subconscious, I think. I mean, I don't know what other people feel about that.
So it's not that he's going to say anything to the contrary, but it's that is it that she feels like she needs to act now before she gives up the will?
Before she gives herself away.
Okay.
Yeah, she dare not stay. She's given herself away already. And it's interesting what Bertrand says. Oh, well, no, why ever did she refuse then? And is this some feminine ploy that you always have to be late for everything to make people wait? Which is very funny. Yeah, very odd. I mean, anyway, he now looks out of the window and says, you will now be happy. This is going to happen. And as he's talking about that, he says, you will, Geoffroy Rudel, and in comes Squarciafico. How he gets in? Well, of course, there's no Chevalier des Anvers to stop him. So anyone can come in now, really. And so then he realized, so you're not Rudel then, because he'd assumed he was. If you remember, he had it all matched up. They were going to marry and be happy ever after, and he and his Genoese friends would run the whole show. The whole town would be theirs, really, because the lovers would be so engrossed with each other. That's what he thought. And so, of course, his first reaction is, oh, no, well, that's no good then. It's not going to happen. There won't be this marriage. And Bertrand, again, doesn't quite understand. He's I think, a little bit naive, don't you? He said, well, we're going to be lucky, says Squarciafico. And Bertrand doesn't understand at all. And so the trader enlarges on this. So he said, well, look, here is the poet who's going to arrive, kills the terrible guardian, and surely the princess is going to marry him. And Bertrand still doesn't understand. So Squarciafico goes on again, how the emperor that Melisande was due to marry hates people like him, the traders from Genoa and Venice. He spells it all out for Bertrand, that, two lovers on the throne, we can do what we like. And Bertrand finally understands what's going and reproves him. I don't know what the English says. Bertrand says, they would stop us. And Bertrand says, from fishing in troubled waters. Did you get that?
Is this so? I think there was some attempt at a pun here. I wasn't quite sure what was happening. So, the merchant's last lines are, lovers on the throne, through deputies their royal will made known. They would not steal their wills, STEEL, to sudden zeal forbidding trade. So they would no longer forbid trade, these lovers on the throne.
That's it, yes.
Bertrand says you'd have the will to steal, STEAL, but I don't really understand that phrase. I mean, I understand what you're describing, but it struck me that it was supposed to be a pun on steal their wills and will steal. It
possibly was meant to be, was in fact a pun, yes. But it's it's really Bertrand saying, this is not, you should not be thinking like this. You know, you shouldn't be getting involved like this. And later on, they continue to talk, don't they? And again, this idea of Rostand's, that a good thing is worth it for itself. A noble idea is worth having, even if it doesn't lead to anything. And so Squarciafico, who is, again, one of these materialist people that are contrasted with the idealists, Squarciafico said, well, Rudel is dying. So what was the point of the voyage? It's been useless. And Bertrand is very angry. In the French, it says, noble aventure, élan d'une grande âme, vous auriez dû servir à quelque chose. You should have been made to do something, this wonderful idea, this wonderful aim, this adventure coming from a noble, and Squarciafico realizes he's really put his foot in it now. And I don't know what oath the translation uses here. He says, damn. D-A-M-E. And Bertrand was thinking about the sailors, and he said they understood, these simple souls. But this trader with his narrow brain dishonors the idea in saying it has to be useful. There'll always be people who try to make a profit from wonderful ideas, and however pure and great they are. And I'll say he remembers what Frère Trophime would have said in reaction to this. And this is such a Rostand idea, the idea that a noble idea is worth it, a noble aim is worth it. It's panache, isn't it, really? Panache, it's the same thing. Part of panache is doing something wonderful, even if it doesn't work, even if you fail. It's still something, doing something, the gesture.
And maybe here even a little bit stronger, because Squarciafico is such the embodiment of materialism, and to have a materialistic end, to have some gain, real world gain, actually dishonors it. So it's not even that it's worth it, even if you don't.
It's worth it for itself.
The material end, it's the material for itself. Yeah, and to have, and I think she does a very good job of translating this part, I think. He says, in his vile brain for tricks and trading fit, dishonors the idea, makes use of it. So the fact of...
yes, makes use of it, that's very good. Yeah.
Making it serve some use, and not is so noble, better foul of use. But there be some to ask, what is the use? Must all be soiled by reckonings infamous? So everything is soiled by looking for some utility, some purpose to it.
But what Squarciafico says next gives us an insight into Bertrand's feelings. And of course, it's an insight that Squarciafico gets immediately. Because when he says, oh, you know, that's awful because the marriage with Manuel that I hate so much will now go ahead, and he will marry. And Bertrand is so upset at the thought that Melisande will marry the emperor. And of course, he gives himself away. And even more, the second thing is he says, no, I swear this barbarous man will never embrace that fragile and rare creature. So now Squarciafico thinks, right, well, maybe I can do something with this idea. And he starts to say, he talks to Bertrand, but Bertrand doesn't look as if he's listening. He's thinking himself, isn't he? But he actually probably will. It's the same. He takes a little while to think this. Yes, she would have married him because she loves poets and French people, you know. But he's dying. And this is Squarciafico, who's sort of buttering up Bertrand, isn't it? I mean, you know, this wonderful journey. Well, there were two of you, of course. You were there, and you did that epic journey as well, of course. But he's dying. That's fate, isn't it? He won't get any benefit from his journey. And so the last line, l'affaire réussie au second, the second person, that meaning Bertrand, he will now have his chance. He will marry Mélisande. This is Squarciafico's suggestion, and Bertrand doesn't pick up on it to start with. Oh, he's still worried about the signal. The signal, will the sail stay white?
Oh, I saw that as a moment of weakness. I saw that as he was finally feeling a moment of weakness, because at least the translation here is always the mast. And then it says, if floating from its peak, I saw death's signal. And then there's another ellipsis. So I got the idea that he's thinking, oh, well, it's true. If I did see a black a black flag in the sign of his death, then maybe I could.
I personally don't see it that way. This mention of Rudel has reminded Bertrand that Rudel is dying, and it's imperative to get to him as quickly as possible. And if he saw how upset he would be with all this delay, it's possible. I don't know, either interpretation is possible. But I think it's not until Squarciafico gets really close to him and says, look, you're being so childish here. Why are you talking for another one? You could talk up for someone alive. And that's when he turns around and says, what are you saying? And that's when Bertrand is really angry. So I think that suggests that Bertrand is simply thinking time is passing. You know, he says, the stage direction says he looks as if he's not listening to Squarciafico. And then, of course, once it's made clear, he is so angry. He's so angry. And just then, Mélisande and Sorismond and all the women, her gentlewomen, come in with the trappings of the princess, the cloak and the diadem. And they see Bertrand gripping Bertrand by the throat, threatening to kill him, calling him a serpent. So
I guess we could. I'm curious. There's two possible interpretations here, and I recognize that I'm going to be also influenced by the interpretation of Mrs. Norman and how she translated it. But I'm wondering, so he could be so angry because he dares to suggest something so unacceptable. And so he's banishing him for daring to suggest it. Or it could be that he's touched something in Bertrand that he feels conscious of and now guilty about and wants to banish the temptation. So he doesn't want Squarciafico in his ear saying, oh, but you could have her if Rudel is not around. So which of those do you think it is?
I think he is still unaware himself what he really wants personally. That's how I feel. But the trouble is, of course, Squarciafico has touched a nerve, absolutely has touched a nerve. And Bertrand is angry, perhaps without realizing why he's so angry. But of course, he is angry at this very suggestion, you know, that he should marry Mélisande. And he is angry, as you say, because subconsciously, he is in love with Mélisande.
But it's still buried, it's still subconscious, so it might be providing fuel to the anger, but
yes, absolutely.
He's okay, that makes sense.
And Squarciafico is sent off. Mélisande again showing her love for Bertrand. If Bertrand is upset by someone, this person will have to go. And she deals with him very, very severely indeed. And of course, Squarciafico says, right, I'm going to get my revenge. So we're left wondering what the revenge will be. What is he planning? What will he do? But as you say, it's becoming more, well, it's certainly been obvious, I think, to the audience for some time, that Bertrand has fallen for Melisandre's charms himself, but he will not, his loyalty to his friend will not allow him to even entertain the idea that he should then claim her. No. So, well, have we reached scene 6, I think, now?
Yes.
Well, you see Melisandre's reaction when she has to put this heavy coat on again, that she has to dress up just as she did for the pilgrims. And this time it is because she has to appear like this to Rudel. But she can't bear to. She can't bear to do this. They're so, he's loved me as a princess, so I must appear as a princess. Oh, gosh, it's so heavy, though, she says. Oh, and she takes it off and hands it to her womenfolk and say, take it down to the ship. I'll put it on. She's putting it off, isn't she, really, till the last moment. As soon as we get there, she says, I will put on all these jewels and this heavy coat. And what's bothering her to some extent is that she is finding it very hard, isn't she, to face Rudel, the dying man. And she says to Sorismond, do you think I shall have to close his eyes? Will they, you know, she's thinking about it. She's still worried about it, isn't she? And what part will she have to play? Will she have to touch a dead man? She's probably never seen a dead man. She's been a very protected person all her life. Sorismond takes the opportunity to suggest, oh, well, you don't have to go. Send your doctor or send the priest. You don't have to go. And,
can I interrupt with a question here? Because I think I just realized something that I had misunderstood. So I want to ask you about this. So in the first scene, when she came out in all her regalia and jewels and cloak, and they were a burden to her, and she was eager to throw them off. But I think I misunderstood that to mean there was something false about the regalia itself. And in fact, I now see, I think, that it is a representation of the ideal, that it is part of her love, this ideal love with Rudel, is the costume. And the fact of it being a burden is part of the burden of maintaining loyalty to the ideal.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So, because I think I just read that in too conventional and cliche a way in the first scene. You know, the woman throwing off the jewels is like, I don't need adornments, but for her, it's the whole picture of the ideal. And now, so I loved this line, and this is where I felt like we're seeing first hints, well, not first hints, but hints of the theme, when she says, seeking one pale with dying eyes grown dull, forsaking him who is living, beautiful. So have loyalty to a dying man is more difficult than the flesh and blood handsome man who is right at your side. That's much easier to be loyal to. Okay.
Yes, she is. You can see, you know, she is really uncomfortable about this, she doesn't quite. She's not prepared to admit what it is. And so Sorismond's second suggestion is, well, okay, don't go then, don't go. It was only an idea. Un lien chimérique is the French. I don't know what the English is there. Just undo this bondage, this bond, which is only in the mind, and be yourself. Take back your freedom of soul. Why not? Says Sorismond. This is her second temptation. It is really a series of 3 temptations. Yes. And here she says, well, since you love the other one, what's stopping you? And Melisandre says, oh, yes, I forgot. I told you that. So she has admitted to herself. She's even told Sorismond that she loves him, but that need not stop her going to visit Rudel. She still feels that is her duty. And so Sorismond's third temptation is, look, you're getting so upset. This love is making you feel so bad. And I would be delighted. I am delighted that you have fallen in love with this young man, because you are leaving your dream and entering reality. You're going back into life from an idea, something that was in your mind, a noble aim. And Melisande says, oh, well, she's ashamed. The first handsome young man who comes along, is she really going to lose her heart just because he's the first one who comes along? She's really ashamed. She had a very high opinion of herself in a way. She has, because Rudel has loved her so much, she has felt she is a sort of ideal princess, and she has worked hard to keep this ideal and to send back to Rudel pictures of herself, images of herself as a beautiful princess, kind and gentle to all comers. And here she is, just an ordinary woman. It's a shock to her, and she's embarrassed and sad and ashamed.
It seems that in order to really feel, Sue, quick question. It seems in order to really feel the power of this play, we have to be careful to how we think about what it means to love from Rostand's point of view. And that I started to become much more conscious of that in these last scenes, that she's saying she's in love with him. But, you know, when we see Sorismond's temptation, what does it mean to love him? He's virile, young, fair-spoken, and his hand is warm on yours, on his pale brow such beauty shines. So it's love of a kind, but I don't think we're meant to believe that she's in love with him in the same way that she held this love for.
This is such an important point. I'm so glad you said that. I mean, Rostand always tried to portray a pure love as the highest form of love, one soul for another. And this that Melisande and Bertrand are explaining is actually a physical passion, a physical attraction, which is a much lower thing in Rostand's eyes. And this is the physical attraction between the two. As you say, I had held his hands and they became warm again. And then she starts talking about his breath, and then she said, oh, well, no, it wasn't really that. And she's trying to get back to what it was. And then she says, oh, well, it was because I thought he was Rudel. And by the time I realized that it wasn't, it was almost too late. And Sorismond does agree. Yeah.
I think it's hard for us as an audience to keep that straight a little bit, because Bertrand is so admirable a character. He seems like somebody worthy of falling in love with.
Yes, yes.
But at the same time, when we see what it is she's responding. Mm-hmm.
Falling in love in the physical sense, I mean, yes. It's not Bertrand's soul that she's admiring particularly, and it's certainly not Mélisande's soul. It almost seems to be mostly her perfume, actually, that has entrapped Bertrand.
Yeah.
I'm a bit concerned about the time. We haven't got to scene 7 yet, which is the big one. But Sorismond carries on trying to persuade her, doesn't she? Well, you know, you're in love, so stay. And you know, it makes sense. La raison, she begins. And Mélisande says, la raison est stupide et ne croit qu'au normal. Il n'admet que le bien tout bien, le mal tout mal. So she's saying that there are mixtures, you know, it's not as clear cut as that. She still loves and pities Rudel, but she also loves Bertrand. She adores him. I don't know. I mean, in French, it's quite clear. The one who's dying for me, je l'aime, je le plains. Et l'autre, j'adore. And she is torn, isn't she? She is torn between the two. And Sorisman makes another so-called rational suggestion. All right, well, look, go on then. Go and visit him, make an appearance, and afterwards, you know, she doesn't spell it out. And Melisande is again angry. This is what your reason is suggesting is an unworthy ruse. I wouldn't resign to that. That's a horrible idea, to let Geoffroy Rudel die within my arms and come back with his friend. Oh, that's just what the world would say. But she doesn't want anything mediocre. And of course, this is what leads to the next thing. She doesn't want anything mediocre. She wants whatever she does has to be, I don't know quite how to put it really, sublime. She has to be sublime. And the next idea she thinks of, okay, well, if I can have a really good, wonderful, beautiful, sublime action, I could try a wicked one. And she could still be a great, wicked woman. She could be a femme fatale. This is the latest idea. And she admits to Sorisman she's very tempted to try this, yes. And she excuses it to herself, saying, well, any woman would feel the same. Well, I think she's right about that. But, and then she mentions the great wicked women of the past, Delilah, of course, Omphale. Rostand wrote a poem about Hercules and Omphale, where Hercules eventually escapes. We haven't got time to go into the legend now, but it was in something in his mind later. And this is where Bertrand comes in and says the ship is ready. And Melisande, now we're in scene 7, and this is Sorisman very quickly goes away, leaves them together. And Bertrand, you don't love anybody, he says. You don't love anybody. And this is a sort of dueling, isn't it, between the two, fencing, you know. Well, actually, I do love someone. Shall I tell you who it is? No, don't tell me, don't tell me. And then he realizes, and he's about to kill himself for the sake of his honor. But then he says, I am disloyal because what you said made me happy. I was pleased to hear you say you love me. But please, and then he begs her, you know, you're a kind person, really. Please go to him, please. And Melisande again twists it, doesn't she? She says, oh, well, if I go to him, I would be so sad, and I might go back to feeling that I couldn't marry you. You know, she is still, I loved him for a long time. And in fact, if I love you, that's the worst side of my character, which is really, I don't know what the English is there. I love.
He was, I sigh because I know 'tis true, my better soul and my worse soul is you.
Yes, that's it. Lovely. Yes, that's right. But then she's rather naughty. She says, well, I'm not going unless you insist. Well, what's he supposed to do? And he says, well, please don't look at me like that. Please don't look at me like that. And that I'm frightened to look out of the window. And so she runs to the window and shuts it. And she proposes that they just forget about him. They've shut the window. They can carry on. She has this long speech, doesn't she? And, you know, we can just stay here like all happy people. We can forget everything else. We can shut out the world. But she can't help every few lines referring to the ship or something like that. The window's shut, she says, and then she goes, you know, I want to make you smile. We're not going to say anything to anybody. Look, you will live at my knees. Nothing is true except our embrace. What remorse should we feel? Who's going to talk to us about a ship? And she can't resist, can she? The whole speech referring to the ship. She's trying to convince him that their love is the only real thing, but she keeps saying, this window, behind this window, what is this story of a black sail? And all the time it's so obvious, she cannot put it out of her mind. And Bertrand notices this. He says, well, you don't stop talking to me about this window. And then she compliments him on the brooch which he's wearing, which was a gift from Geoffroy Rudel. And Bertrand is so guilty. He feels so guilty, but he finds it very hard to resist. And when the window blows open, they can't bear to shut it. This is the wind blows the window open. And she says, well, go and shut it then. And he says, no, I'm too afraid to look through the window. Well, she says, you just don't look. You shut it quickly without looking. No, I know I'd look, says Bertrand. And so she gets up. All right, she says, the way to do it is you don't look through the window. You go sideways to it. You go sideways to the window. And even she, when she gets to the window, she can't bear to shut it. And she retreats. She retreats and pulls him down onto the divan beside her and say, well, let's just lose ourselves in our love. And the idea she develops then is that most lovers have this window behind them that they take care not to look through. They want to keep, they refuse to look through whatever it is of duty that might be reproaching them. That's the gist of it, isn't it? They all want to ignore that they are assassins. So let's do what we're doing. Let's stay in these. And she says, les lâches coussins, these betraying, these cowardly cushions. Let's just embrace each other hidden in these cushions and ignore what might be happening that would make us feel guilty.
I just love that image so much. I mean, we can wait to get to the metaphorical meaning of this whole scene, but the idea of cowardly cushions, yes. How many times I might invoke that image, something calling me away from a nobler sense of purpose.
Absolutely. I think we've probably all experienced this urge to shut off some duty, that pretend it doesn't exist, that we're very happy as we are, thank you. And but she is so aware of this, she cannot really forget. And Bertrand is still reluctant. He is, isn't he? He says, yes, well, let's stay here, but are we really that kind of person? I mean, how could we be happy like that? We're not like that. We're not that kind of person. And she says, yes, je t'aime, she says. And then they hear a noise out of the window. Oh, shock, horror, what is it? And Melisande, it's just the children who play out there. And it's nothing. They come off and they play at throwing little bones or dice, whatever. And only then does he say, Melisande, je t'aime. I love you, Melisande. What fairy gave you that name, your baptismal name, these honey-scented lips and hair? And he has finally brought himself to say that he loves Melisande. And what happens? There are voices saying, look. And they are shocked. What? And then they say, do you see this ship? Oh, don't listen, says Melisande. But I can't help it, says Bertrand. Well, I'm not listening. And then in the same breath, she says, what are they saying? She can't resist either. She wants to know. And he points, he says, look, you know, you're just the same as me. We can't forget Rudel. We can't put him out of our mind. We can't ignore our duty and our loyalty to Rudel. Well, it's just a ship, says Melisande. But then a voice says, oh, look, the black sail. The black sail. And then the voices say, I'm going down to see, are you coming? And so the people go, and Bertrand and Melisande are on their own. And this is the end, isn't it, for them? This is the end for any romance between them. They can't even look at each other. They slowly separate, and there's a very long silence. I mean, the drama here on stage. And so that's it. That's it. What can they do? And Bertrand says, well, it takes up Mélisande's idea. Well, oh, what lovely perfume. And again, it's the perfume he likes. What is this perfume that you told me just now? What was it? And she says, it's amber. Bertrand tries. He says, oh, I'm kissing your scarf. But then he cannot bear it any longer and collapses. He collapses with terrible cries and sobs. And what have I done? What have I done? And then he says, and what have you done? And Melisande, well, it is terrible, but now I have got you. You've got a traitor, he says. I'm not worthy to be your husband. And then this is still her idea about being the great temptress. Yes, but isn't it rather fine to betray someone for love? But no, Bertrand says, I'm not that kind of person. I don't have the beauty of a great traitor. I'm not the hero, proud of his crime, but the child that every change, every breath of air makes feel soft, softens the feeble cur. Thy feeble heart is just an incessant trend. I mean, it's too easy to make me betray someone. And if you remember, he said that right at the beginning, didn't he? To Frère Trophine, that really he's a poet. He uses that as a sort of reason. So anything will move him. He can be pour un parfum. Even for a perfume, I become a slave. I'm just possessed by the moment. I know myself very well. You say you have me. To have me is to have nothing. It's just to have. Is unstable poet like rushing water, or where the time of day is reflected? Well, that's really awkward, isn't it? But you understand. He is saying he's not a good person for her to love at all, and he is so remorseful. Melisande,
Sue, and this is to remind us in the audience too, what he's saying we're meant to believe and think is true and take literally.
yes.
Yes, not real love. They were swept. He was swept
off their feet. Yes, exactly. I mean, it was to some extent true. He was the first handsome young man she had seen, and he just loved her perfume. And it was there was nothing noble about this love, and certainly nothing great about Mélisande's plan to trap him. And she now realizes that, doesn't she? Because he starts to blame her. She says, you've been a kind of I don't know how you say that really, Circe, in Odysseus, the witch who seduces and all Ulysses's crew and then turns them into pigs. I mean, that's quite a well-known that he's saying. So it's your fault. You had this wicked art. You lost me just for a whim. And that really goes home to Melisande. What, do you think I'm just some woman who he can have just like that? Haven't you seen that it was a great passion? Was I the only one in my dream? That it was and then of course that's why we did it. L'horrible chose. She means the betrayal. That's why we did this horrible thing. We betrayed Rudel. But then he says, yes, it's her. It's her fault. But then, of course, he says, no, I didn't say that. I need you more than ever now, he says. But of course, Melisande says, no, it's too late. And again, she says, that's why we did it. That's why we betrayed Rudel. That's why we went back on this noble dream of ours for something that was just physical attraction. And also, she then admits that actually their great passion wasn't very fulfilling after all. It wasn't what she'd expected or hoped for. Forgetting myself in your arms wasn't actually a great deal. It didn't help me. It didn't help me. And she goes, and it's very interesting. This is very Rostand to say at the end of that, just before Bertrand says, everything is over, she says, will I ever feel calm? Will my soul ever find peace? Now, if you remember, Frere Trophine has said in Act 1, the only peace comes from losing yourself completely, either in a noble aim like Rudel, a noble vision, or some way you have to lose yourself. And Melisande is realizing, and in fact, in Act 2, she said, this heavy coat and my reputation that I have to keep up is one of the things that weighs me down, but I have another worry, and she doesn't tell us what it is, another trouble in my soul. And this is her trouble. She has not yet found a way of losing herself in a noble idea, in something noble. And the last line of that speech, and it is really significant, sorry about the time, La source, where is the source? Where is the fresh water that I need? And of course, the next play Rostand wrote was La Samaritaine, which is about Jesus meeting the woman of Samaria at the well. And the woman of Samaria, who has had 6 lovers and still cannot find peace for her soul, is similar to Melisande. And so this idea is developed in the next play that Rostand will write. And think what he must have suffered. Then they are so sad. And by the way, in the French, they vary from using the polite vous until when they're trying to be lovers, and then they go to tu, and now they're back to vous again. And they can't speak to each other. They just say, Melisande goes to the window and begs Rudel for forgiveness and sees the sail is white. The sail is white. And then Bertrand runs to the window as well. Yes, it's white, still it's white. And Melisande takes this as a pardon for her betrayal. And notice how she keeps saying white. She's back to the lilies again from the roses. White, the sail, white against the blue sky, white like a hope of pardon. Please keep this whiteness on the sail. This white sail will be my supreme star. You cannot stifle the appel of the call of duty. I am coming to you, she repeats. I'm coming to you, Geoffroy Rudel. And that's toi. I'm coming to you, Geoffroy Rudel. And that's how the act ends. So we've seen a drama, an interior drama, really. Most of the action was in people's minds. Neither of them was satisfied by that passion, so-called. The pure love of one soul for another, Rostand is saying, is the greatest love of all. Physical love is not satisfying without the soul as well.
I am very happy to stay around until 9:30 if there's anybody else who has the time to stick around. Sue, I won't oblige you to do that. If you have time to stay, that's wonderful. But I have no gymnastics competition to rush off to today, so I have time. And one thing I want, well, there's lots I'd love to talk about, but the first thing I just have to say is I was struck today just by how Cyrano this, I don't know why it didn't occur to me how Cyrano this plot is, but it's Rudel's words and soul being delivered in the messenger of Bertrand. So I just hadn't seen how
yes,
directly.
indeed. Yes, I hadn't thought of that either. Yes. Yes,
because there was one line where
is the spokesperson for Christian, who can't explain his love suitably to. Yes, that's right.
And even though Bertrand is, I think we have to fall in love with him in some sense for this story to have power. So it makes sense that we admire him and sort of feel drawn to him in a way similar to, we can't just look at it as purely superficial. We can't experience it that way, otherwise it wouldn't have its power. So I think we fell a little bit in love with Bertrand too, because he's a wonderful man and he's very loyal. But it also occurred to me that not only is, Rudel the great soul and the pure love soul to soul, but when Bertrand first meets Melisande, what does he say? Rudel's words.
Yes.
Actually delivering Rudel's words. So those are the words that he seduces. I mean, not intentionally, but that's just that was so interesting that this device, he's already got it kind of brewing in his mind. And then it comes into its full glory in Cyrano.
When Rostand was welcomed into the Académie Française, the person giving the welcome speech, Vicomte de Vogue, said, La Princesse Lointaine is the key poem to your work. The ideas are all there. Now that you've all read La Princesse Lointaine, you will understand other Rostand plays far better, because he uses the same ideas again and again.
That's the other thing I wanted to talk about, is that after this act, I decided this is not a play about love. And I really needed to make myself see it not as a play about love to have a true appreciation for it. I feel like love is the stand-in, like that's the value that he's chosen.
It's a play about your loyalty, isn't it?
To center this idea.
Loyalty to
an ideal.
Noble idea, yes. That's what I see anyway. Yes.
But it's interesting that it allowed me to enjoy it more, to see it that way, because understandably, all of us would like for love to include the physical as well as the spiritual and noble. And so the idea of being loyal to a love that you never get to see, or who's going to die, I mean, there's something, it's a little bit hard to relate to it.
It's all too believable
those
that
terms.
Bertrand and Melisande are drawn to each other. It is all too believable. It's all too human. They are humans and they're behaving like humans. But there is, beyond this, there is a greater ideal that one can aim for. And that is to forget yourself. Yes.
So when I think of it in terms of, like the image of the cowardly cushions, when I think of it as in terms of the lure of temptation, more in terms of kind of, this is just personally how I feel better able to relate to it, more in terms of the close at hand metaphor makes a lot more sense to me now, because there are the kind of overarching devotions that give your life real meaning, and then there's the temptations that are close at hand. And so the princess, the whole idea of this being far away, we can think of far away in the sense of actually distant physically, and so there's no kind of material reality to it, but we can also think of it as far away in the sense that it's abstract and grand and more fundamental. And so not inherently not close at hand, it's more long range. And maintaining a devotion to long range goals can be profoundly difficult, and we can all face temptation and the cowardly and the
and we can all lose sight of
desire
them
to bury ourselves. Yes, right. They can literally be out of sight in the fog, or all those images we had at the beginning.
And sometimes deliberately, as Melisande was suggesting, that we want to put things away and not think about them because they're too difficult. Sorry.
I wanted to see the Johnson family. Molly's this you. Feel free to unmute and pipe in here. But you're mentioning the ways that we legitimately fall for Bertrand and for their love, Molly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We know more about Bertrand than about Rudel. We see him on stage, we see his emotions, we see his change from being loyal and ready to fall at her feet and carry her to Rudel to wanting to stay and give up everything. So I think we fall in love with him.
Yeah.
And there's all this epic stuff going on. He's fighting off multiple soldiers, huge men with great big axes. I mean, he kills the guy. So these are epic conquests that he's undergoing. So I felt like he deserved her in fighting, in making that fight. And so I wanted him to get his prize.
But I think the difficulty, we have to accept Rostand's belief that, I mean, it's a little bit hard to relate to the idea that this love for something she's never met, for someone she's never set eyes on, that that is real, and that is the superior love. And that's why I think for me, it helps to just think of it more metaphorically, that there is my phone, I mean, comfy cushions and phones go along really well together. That I can get from scrolling through TikTok, not that I would really do that, but that is the temptation many people face, is close at hand. And the desire to translate all of Rostand's poems is one distant and abstract and elusive, and not close at hand and tangible. So it's just, thinking of the love for Rudel as the true ideal, the deepest, most fundamental values you have. And I have to think of it in those terms for the play to have power. Otherwise, I want her to be with Bertrand too. But we have to see that they both recognize, even though they're very good, they both have so much that we love about them, and they're drawn together, and we follow along with them falling in love. We have to believe them when they realize that it wasn't what they thought it was, or else it loses all power. Sorry, Shoshana, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I don't want to hijack this discussion, but I think that most of us have read Atlas Shrugged. Okay, and so if Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand, and so the Bertrand is not part of that story, but the idea of the true love of yeah, and there's a special scene in Atlas Shrugged where she's speaking of her love for someone she's never met.
Right.
Okay, so just think about it for a minute, and I think it.
Other connection.
Help.
Yeah, that's good. I also, this is a side connection, but just with the Ayn Rand connections, the ideal versus being a criminal. I thought of Dominique in that connection, not anything but the halfway and the in between. So she's like, if I can't have the ideal, then I'm just going to go wholly into being a criminal. I can't have some incoherent mixture of the two, but that just drives her back to the ideal.
I think what Rostand means by a vision or a dream, what he's talking about here, is something that takes you out of ordinary life and gives you something to aim for, that lifts you out of humdrum ordinary existence, something that is higher than ordinary human existence, something that is beyond reach, in fact. Yes, beyond reach. I mean, you know, the poet Robert Browning, the English poet Robert Browning said, you have to have, I can't remember the exact lines. Something has to be out of reach, else what's a heaven for? The idea is that something has to be beyond what you can get. And this is Rostand's theme all the way through, through his work, that there is something beyond which is worth more than ordinary everyday life, because we'll see in Act 4 what Frère Trophime says when he sums up. That will be Rostand's words better than mine. But this is the idea that we're trying to grasp, that there is something worth striving for beyond ordinary human love and human actions. And it's something that doesn't necessarily is something that is going to materially help us. That's the whole point. It's got to be something that isn't material, that is out of life, that we can aim for.
And
does that help?
Absolutely. And it's true for all people, but it also struck me that Rostand is so often writing about the artist and the soul that an artist must have. So we can make connections to Chanticleer in that regard, but also I've been reading and working a little bit on the poems in Les Musardis. Is that, was that written before or after La Princesse Lointaine, his first collection of poems?
There's a 1911 edition, so that would be before La Princesse Lointaine, and he was writing them from 1895 onwards.
Okay, because all the themes are present in the first two poems in the collection. So the first poem is a tribute to the failures, to the artists whose ideas are too big for reality, who, you know, chase the painters who chase the ever elusive color.
This is the
musicians
thing.
who hear chords in their head that they can't write.
Yes. This is why I'm really glad you're translating these poems, because the early poems already reveal so much about Rostand's attitude to life, and his heroes are poets. You recall, I mean, Cyrano is a poet, Chanticleer is a poet, because, well, he sings anyway, and there's another, but I can't think who it is, but they are poets, and he is a poet. He always said he was a poet rather than a dramatist, and so he sees life as a poet. Doesn't mean to say he lived life like that. No, I mean, we can't reach the ideal. The whole point of an ideal is you strive for it, but you can't necessarily reach it, but it's worth striving. It's worth aiming high. Yeah.
But you can see why, especially, I mean, this came out so strongly in Chanticleer, but for the artist, the ideal, the impossible ideal, in a sense, you know, the absolutely stylized universe, the you know, the kind of rendering of the perfect is so, I think he sees that as so important to uplifting people in their everyday lives, helping them, you know, do the best they can to have that as a goal. But the artist really has to stay committed to the presentation of that ideal. I'm sorry, Stefan has been waiting to talk to him.
No, it's okay. Yeah, it seems like Rostand is making love kind of impossible here. And what I mean is, early on, we get this idea that the ideal is better than meeting the actual concrete love. And it seems like Bertrand is basically the same as Rudell. I mean, we really don't know anything about Rudell, so it's like his ghost almost, and she can't have that, and she can't have Rudell either. You know what I mean? So it's like an impossibility that he's making. So I see them almost as like the same person in a way. He might as well be. They're both handsome. They're both poets. You know, they're both everything. But she can't have Bertrand. You know, and she can't have Rudell either. So the ideal remains as the only thing you can have.
Yes, what she's had from Rudell is, of course, the ideal of this love, this distant love. So Rudell has given her something. He's given her something to live up to. Is that what you mean?
I think
because you can't. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I think that we have to think of the love for Rudell as real. I mean, that's why I said I think of it a little bit more metaphorically, or a little bit less like a love story. But I think to see it from Rostand's perspective, we have to see her not as failing at achieving love. The love for Rudell is real, and it is what she ought to remain loyal to. Now, that's very at odds with our understanding of what we want our love lives to be like, and that's I think a separate issue. But I don't think we're meant to see her as failing to achieve love if she stays loyal to Rudell.
Okay.
No, indeed. I mean, this is her destiny in a way. It's her destiny to remain loyal to Rudell, because if she doesn't, she's not remaining loyal to her better self.
Yeah,
it's a very hard concept I think for anyone really, and the 20th century, to feel, you know, I mean, we're in a materialistic civilization, and that's why you have people like Sorismond and Squarciafico, who are putting the materialist day to day, what people will say, you know, that this is their attitude that they will have to such an extraordinary aim or noble vision. You know, it doesn't make sense to people unless they want something a bit more than what they can see and touch. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't probably explain it very well, but it's something beyond ordinary life. And a lot of people are quite happy with ordinary life. They make a lot of money, they buy a nice big house or whatever. They have wonderful children. But Rostand's suggesting that it's a good idea to have something more to aim at. I mean, actually, the aim of being a really good father would be a good aim. But it
to be an abstract aim, and there needs to be something intangible, abstract. I think it's the difference between taking it literally, that we must have goals that are not achievable and that have no connection to material success, or just stuff, and you might find it more kind of relatable if you think of it as our most abstract of values are inherently intangible. Like they're the things that are providing the kind of the math and the guidance, and they're easy to forget, and they're easy to lose sight of because they're not immediately present. So I think I'm not saying this is that. I think Rostand really does believe that love is superior, that it just involves the soul. You know, love of the soul is actually superior to love of the body. And that maybe, sorry. So the long range, if you think about it in terms of to long range, true, heartfelt devotions, as opposed to what's close at hand. It's more, I guess, relatable.
Yeah. So my only thing is that Rudell is dying. She can't ever seem to have the physical. Like even in Cyrano, it's like by the time it's found out the real love and the truth of it, it can never actually be. It just feels like it's an impossible situation, meaning like the ideal can always be there, but the physical aspect of she can't have either of them because one is like a betrayal and her loyalty is to someone who's going to be dead soon, you know. So it just, that's what I mean. Love is impossible, but the actual physical love, the ideal remains.
No, Rostand says repeatedly and in so many different works and in so many different forms that a devotion to your values is better if it's in vain. So that might not be a sentiment that you relate to, that it's better for it to be in vain, but it doesn't, and I'm not sure I entirely do too, but that's beside the point. It doesn't diminish its power and value to me in any sense, because there is such a profound element of truth to the fact that the values that mean the most and matter the most involve devotion. They involve being steadfast. They involve avoiding temptation. They involve keeping sight on something that is in the fog and in the distance. I mean, there's just so much truth to it that I find it extraordinarily powerful, whether you fully go the whole way, that whole distance that Rostand does.
Thank you.
Well, of course, he's not saying that you if you are in love with someone that's wrong. He's simply, it's just adding another dimension to love. He's not saying physical love is wrong. He's simply saying that there is, you know, you can have a relationship with someone which is great. It's greater than just a physical one. I don't think I'm explaining very well.
I think that it is. Luke?
So first off, Sue, I think I see your point that Rostand is saying there's some physical love is good, but there's something greater to it. And it makes me think a little bit of Christian is a noble character. He's not a scumbag materialist. No, he's good. And Bertrand is a noble character as well. Okay, I think I'm starting to reconcile myself to the fact that there is a greater love than what Bertrand and Melisande have, but I've been trying to think of why I was attracted to their love so much. And there's one particular passage that I think was the thing that struck me, and I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on what is meant by that. And it's a whole brooch thing. And he says, he realizes, this is the brooch that he gave me. And she says, you know what? If you'd come here without that brooch, in fact, if you'd come here in rags, I would have loved you.
Yes.
So that at that point, I was like, wow, okay, let me look past the surface veneer of things. And she's getting to him.
Yes.
Loving him.
Absolutely. I mean, she was just making conversation in a way because they were both a bit embarrassed. And so she was saying, oh, well, what a lovely brooch. And of course, it went straight back to Rudel. It reminded them both of Rudel because he said, yes, it was a present from Rudel. And so Rudel was present all the time in scene 7. He's there with them. They can't ignore him. And I think there's a very elaborate metaphor that one translation has, which he says, if you hadn't been wearing that brooch, I would have made one with my lips for you.
Yeah.
But that's not quite what Rostand says.
But
Go ahead.
It's a very alluring comment to make. But it's meant also to stress the physical. Get rid of
it is.
that homage to duty. With my lips.
Yes. And Bertrand is so embarrassed because he says she's loving me because likes me because I wear the jewels you gave me. Yes. But then, as you say, the next essentially is I would have loved you anyway. Yes. And yes, that's right. And I would have seized your throat and given you my mouth as a brooch. Yes.
But so, Luke, you're saying that you interpreted that as meaning it's true love, but she's still just in her seductress, going fully committing to this crime mode. So
mentioning it was to remind them that it was Rudel who had
right.
given him, bring Rudel back. He's never been far from them in this scene at all. Yes.
I almost wonder, so it's been mentioned several times that, Rudel, we haven't met him, he's in the distance, it's abstract, it's not tangible, Bertrand is, and I almost feel like that could be deliberate. It's not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be, her mantle feels like a burden at times. And the devotion of love is to that love is hard to maintain. It's much more tempting when he's right in front of us. Well, Bertrand is right in front of us too, so we get tempted by
yes. We will see in the next act, there's something that Melisande says, which will have a bearing on this. I'm not going to say what it is now, but we'll look out for it, and I'll alert us when we get to it.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for staying longer. That was very satisfying. I enjoyed talking about it. And I will see you again for the final act next Sunday. Okay, thank you.
See ya.
Thank you.